Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. We join Mr. Rajeev Srinivasan, technocrat, now currently teaching at the IIM Bangalore, on something that is very close to both of us, which is that how companies are run and how you have situations where if you just take the airline sector, which is critical for a country, you have two airlines, Kingfisher Airlines, and you have Jet Airlines, and the employees don't get paid salaries, and the owners are basking in some tax haven or what have you. We don't even know where they are. Maybe we do know Malia is in London. Before I start the question, welcome to PGurus channel, Rajeev.
Thank you very much, Sri. Good to be here.
So the question for you, Rajeev, is why is it that when airlines or companies stop paying salaries, suddenly the employees expect the government to come in and bail them out? What about the good times? Then they don't remember the government.
Yeah, I think there is a strange sentimentality in India, which is probably a relic of our old socialist Mai Baap Sarkar days, that suggests that it is the responsibility of the government to look after every single individual when they are in trouble, but not, as you said, when they're making money. At that time, they try to secrete it somewhere else and far away from the taxman. This is a problem that not only has come up in the case of Kingfisher and now Jet Airways, as you mentioned, but also in the case of Air India, right? Which let's not forget, that's become a money sink, like a black hole. We've been spending enormous amounts of money, public taxpayer money, on an ongoing basis. So
that's true. Let's talk about Air India separately. Please finish your thought about these two private run airlines, because I have a slightly different theory on that.
Right. Yeah. So I'm thinking it's not only in airlines, because I'm a little nervous. What happens if tomorrow the same situation shows up in telecom companies, right? Because we've had a large number of airlines coming up, a bunch of private airlines. Modi Luft was one. There was another called, I'm trying to remember the name, it's from Coimbatore. There's a whole bunch of airlines that came up when it looked like India was going to be a huge flying market. And it continues to be a growing market. And today there is this tremendous effort to bring smaller airports into play. There is this program called Udan, whereby not so well-known second and third tier airports are being refurbished, and the government has asked people to fly there at relatively low cost. So on the one hand, India is one of the biggest markets for airliners as well. If you look at Boeing and Airbus and so forth, their order books are filled with orders from the likes of Indigo and whatnot. So it's a big industry in India, and as we all know, it's one of the things that sort of gets business moving, having good airports, good airlines, good flight connectivity and so forth. So I would say it's a strategic industry in some sense. Unfortunately, you could say that about any industry that's in a little bit of trouble. That's why I brought up the example of telecom. Is telecom strategic industry? Well, it is. So it's a bad idea to set a precedent here that could be something that other people quote when they get into trouble. Because for the longest time, I think, Jet Airways was doing quite well. They had international flights. They had a tie-up with Etihad, which owns about 25% of it. And they were reaching out, and they were sort of a flag carrier, a second flag carrier. And I'm not even sure exactly what happened to them. I think it's probably competition that hurt them, possibly the fact that they didn't have a really good business model. Because one of the things that I teach my business school students is that, the most important thing perhaps for a company is the business model. And if that's not very clear, or maybe if you have an ambiguous business model, you're likely to fail. And that was exactly what we saw in the case of Kingfisher, because they couldn't make up their mind as to whether they were a full service airline or a low cost airline, and they tried to be both and fell in between, apart from various other problems that they had. I think to some extent, Jet has had that problem too, which is that they started off, and until recently, they advertised themselves as a full-service airline. But among other things, I think the frugality of Indian flyers suggests that nobody is really very interested in a full-service airline. They're perfectly happy with low-cost airlines so long as the fares are low and the flights are on time, etc. And that's the niche I think that Indigo jumped into. Now, Indigo has, if you look at it, what I might consider a borderline predatory business model. Now, they have taken the Southwest Airlines model, which has been so successful in the US, which is no frills and just one type of airline, and they try to keep the planes in the air as much as possible. The turnaround time is very quick, and it's point to point and so forth.
20 minutes.
Sorry?
20
minutes, right.
Yeah.
Right, and they do it, and they're on time much of the time as well. And so they've perfected that art of low-cost flying. Plus, I think they're also, in my observation, they are trying to push everybody else out of the market. So, for example, if there is let's say, a Mumbai to Bangalore flight, which
you mean Indigo? You mean Indigo?
Indigo is, and that is one of the things that hurt Jet, right? Jet was probably it took his eyes off the Indian market and started focusing perhaps more on its overseas tie-ups with Etihad and others, and flying to Europe, and they have a hub in Brussels, flying on to the US and things like that. In the meantime, Indigo came in out of nowhere, and I think they've captured a significant fraction of the Indian market. So I'm just trying to lay down a little bit of the background in terms of what happened to Jet. Now, it's likely that there's a plethora of things there, but I think competitive pressure was probably the thing that really laid them low. And as someone who believes to a significant extent on free market capitalism, I think that's a reasonably good model. We cannot go out as a government and bail out everybody who's in a bit of trouble. That's one of the issues that I'm seeing. As you said, we can't bail out the airlines, nor can we bail out all the employees. That's just not a proper usage of taxpayer money.
Now, there is one small difference about what happened in Jet and compared to, say, what happened in the case of, say, Air India. Now, in the case of Air India, it's a government-owned airline. Unfortunately, Air India got saddled with debts from dubious purchases, wherein the previous government bought full fare, paid full fare, or probably a little bit more than that for the planes, only to turn around and give them at fire sale prices to other airlines. Nobody has still figured out where the balance went, who benefited, and so on and so forth. So it's a matter of, Air India has a problem in that it is being riddled with a lot of debt, and they don't quite know how to come out of that. And also, one important thing that I see, one important hope or a silver lining that I see for Air India is that they now fly from India to US non-stop, and most of these flights catch the tailwind, which means they are actually circumnavigating the world, which is fine as long as they got that one thing going for them, which the other airlines don't do. So they need to take full advantage of that. And I mean, it's not at all unusual for you to be in San Francisco from New Delhi in 15 hours if you catch a good tailwind,
Right.
So Air India is a bit of outside this league, and I hope that will figure, something will come out of that. But in general, why is it a taboo to allow companies to fail in India? I mean, it's not something like it's a personal failure. I mean, even if you look at a different instance, somebody, there are specific jatis which will do specific trading. For example, most of the diamond jewelry is being done by Palampur Jains. Nothing wrong in that. But what I'm trying to say is the community itself funds the newer players. And if somebody fails, they go and, they don't just desert that person. They try to find out what went wrong and help him out or her out to come out with a different model. So failure as such isn't a taboo, but somehow in our socialistic mindset, from which we need to really come out quickly. It's now 26 years. I mean, 1991 is when Narasimha Rao unleashed,
opened up.
Yes. And how much longer do you think it will take before India starts truly thinking and acting like a capitalist?
Well, before I get into that, I wanted to give a nod to Professor Vaidya and his new book, uh, Caste is Social Capital. And I'm sure you'll be speaking to him. This is one of the things that I've discussed with people like Professor Vaidya and a couple of others, Mr. Gurumurthy and Professor Kanaga Sabapati of Shastra University. All three of them have made a very strong case for the fact that jati actually has significant economic value. Just as you said, you can depend on your fellow jati members to help you out and pool their resources. It's not charity. They're expecting to get their money and more back.
Right.
And there are other examples of this in the US. If you remember, the entire green grocery business in New York City is run by Koreans who pool their resources. And the entire newspaper business in New York City is run by Indians who pool their money to help each other. So, yeah, the idea that there is a Mai Baap Sarkar is a vestige of socialist days that I think we should get away from. And one of the things that the analysis by these gentlemen about jati as social capital shows is that there are two kinds of jatis. One kind, as you said, that tries to rise up by their bootstraps, their own resources, and they have done well. The other kinds of jati are the people who go to the government and say, bail us out, give us more of the pie, etc. And those people generally have continued to labor at the bottom because there is only a limited amount of money that you can get. And at that, I think you made a very astute connection there. Just like those jatis who are looking for bailouts don't really deserve the bailouts because they're just going to waste it. I think companies should also understand that failure is part of life because, as 95% plus of startups fail. This is a normal thing. And in India, I think it's even more, right? So there's nothing wrong with failure. And it's not the case that the government needs to bail them out, except if there is something really strategic. Because I've had the feeling that the airline business is considered strategic by a lot of different governments, right? So they're keeping on their ailing flag carriers, Alitalia, Swiss Air, all of them are kept on ICU, right, by their respective government. And going back to Air India, I just want to digress for a minute there. They also were affected by, I think, Jet Airways and Etihad and that connection, because a lot of the landing slots that Air India had, if I'm not mistaken, were given away by the previous government to others, in particular Etihad, which is a big loss for Air India. But
yes. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. There's a different video episode of what exactly happened there, why the emir of a certain country had to be appeased, and so on. Please continue. But our courts don't think there was any malfeasance. That's another issue.
Right. Well, courts, are subject to various pressures and so forth. But now the interesting thing that I found really startling is that the Etihad people are trying to offload their stake in Jet, which surprised me because I thought that was part of their long-term goal. Now, the creditors such as State Bank and so forth are being asked to take on Etihad's share as well and to convert debt into equity. And I don't think our banks know how to run an airline. So there's something really fishy going on. I think the message that should go out really is, guys, you made some decisions that went wrong, or maybe you were just unlucky. It doesn't mean that we have to pay, the government has to pay the salaries of the pilots and so forth. Go find jobs somewhere else. In fact, a lot of them have started doing that. Many of them got employed by SpiceJet. A number of them are going to Indigo. Because I was also thinking a couple of years ago, maybe there's this big noise about there aren't enough pilots in India, and they were importing all these, Central Europeans and so forth. You could hear their accents when you were on some flight, and you couldn't hardly understand them. So what happened to that pilot shortfall? Is it a glut now? So I think there is no real reason for the government to bail these people out. Yes, humanitarian, etc. But they didn't ask us, i.e. the government, when they took the job. So now when they've lost the job, I don't think they have a moral right to come and say, look, you got to continue to give us our salaries. I'm sorry, that sounds a little bit brutal, but I think that's the way capitalism works, and you can't bail out everybody all the time.
So Rajiv, I'm going to put you in the hot seat now. I'm going to
Yeah,
make you the CEO of this ailing company called Jet Airlines. You're
right.
you're losing some mega capital from Etihad, and you have to do a turnaround. What would you do?
Well, this is where I was saying I'm not quite sure what the problem was. Okay, my conjecture is that they were outcompeted in the domestic market by Indigo. Okay, now if that is the case, they may have to fight back doing the same thing Indigo did, which is to say, look, we will now run only one kind of airline. Okay, and we'll now position ourselves. Our business model should be exactly like Indigo's, because there are at least a few airlines in the US that are running with that model, right? There's what is it,
JetBlue. JetBlue.
JetBlue, right?
Yes.
Right. And so there's room for more than one player. And SpiceJet is also, running a low-cost model, and they're also doing rather well. So it's not impossible to do that in the Indian market. So if I were the CEO, what I would do is take inventory of where my cost structure is. Is it bloated beyond reason? Is it that my operational structure with 4 or 5 different types of aircraft and food on board and so on and so forth, the positioning as a full service airline, just ditch that and now go to the model of the low cost airline and start competing with Indigo. Now, I don't know if it's too late, if Indigo has already sort of totally I would say, I'm struggling for the word, I'm just saying,
I can help
blanketed.
Yes.
The word blanketed the place, because I'm noticing that I fly on Indigo periodically, and just the other day I was looking. I think in February they started like 12 flights from Cochin. Cochin to Guwahati, Cochin to Jaipur, and I'm like, who the hell is going to go from Cochin to Guwahati, right? I'm just thinking they are doing this blanketing tactic to push everybody out of the market so that they can essentially create a monopoly. And of course, once you have monopolies, you can have monopoly rent. So this is the business model, which is slightly predatory, as I was saying, that the jet people will have to fight back against. And they'll have to fight back doing exactly the same thing that Indigo is doing.
Here's a hint. Here's a big hint to Jet. If you want to try and get inspired from Indigo style, I do personally prefer Indigo, but I also see a lot of challenges there. For one thing, they really slam you if you're above overweight. And having, I travel from India, from the United States.
The US.
I'm almost always stuck with excess baggage, and it's almost the same amount as the cost of the ticket. And it's unfair because I'm stuck with bags that I don't have a way of going from place A to place B, and such cases, there must be some sort of a way. And they say that within 24 hours you have to register, and then it sounds a little too, bureaucratic. And it's almost like, we have something in place, but good luck, using that. So that's one thing. And the second thing about Indigo is their service could be better. And if you can take care of those two things, boy, you can give Indigo a run for their money.
I think you're right. Indigo is not particularly nice to you, right? You don't get a warm, fuzzy feeling with them. Their customer service is not that great. Onboard service is all right. But if you can differentiate yourself, and I see a lot of complaints. Like, for example, one of the things they did recently was that they force you, or they try to encourage you to pre-check-in, okay? But they started charging you for every seat, including the middle seats. Now, this caused a huge ruckus online, and finally they withdrew from that. So now there are a few middle seats they didn't have to pay anything extra for. But they do this nickel and diming you to death, that aspect also. So Indigo is not exactly a much loved airline or anything. So there is an opportunity, as you said, to provide Indigo Plus kind of service, better than Indigo, but at the same low prices. And frankly, the prices that Indigo charges and what Jet charges are not all that different. I haven't seen a massive difference between them. So I think Jet probably left some money on the table, and their full size offering, full service offering wasn't quite the thing that the country wanted. Also, I think you can't discount the railways. They're beginning to improve, and with all the traffic, like for example in Bangalore, if I have a flight, I leave 4 hours ahead, 4 hours, just to be sure I get on the flight, and I've still missed flights, right? So, for example, to go from Bangalore to Chennai, you'd be daft to take a flight, right? You're much better off taking a train. So trains and, the service levels are not great yet, but they're beginning to come up, and they'll start attacking you at the low end. But the growth opportunity for them, I think, again, will be to some of the smaller airports that are being opened up. There's an airport in Sikkim now, and there's one in Arunachal Pradesh and so forth, and a bunch of smaller airports like I'm thinking in Hubli, places like that. So those are things that they could look at. But in reality, my belief is that just like Kingfisher failed to create a real distinction and ended up falling between two stools, I think Jet also found out that their high-end offering was just not cutting it.
Well, one advantage I think Jet still has is they have all these foreign routes,
Right.
and those are big bucks, and typically those run full if you price them, aggressively. So I
Right.
think Jet has more than one avenue of income, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, I was mentioning this a while ago. I think their international operations are okay.
Okay.
They have a fairly decent network. I think the domestic operations is where they took the eye off the ball, and Indigo came in and just kind of beat them up. And therein again lies this concern. To some extent, people have this concern about geo. I use geo right now. In fact, I'm using a geo connection. It's good, but geo, there is a possibility that they'll push everybody else out of the market, and then we're back to the good old days. The really good old days you remember of the BSNL monopoly, where they just don't care, right? Or like in the US, you had that Lily Tomlin skit, which said, with a phone company, we don't have to care, right? So
Right.
there is, in my mind, the concern that many of these companies, and that's not, unreasonable, they're trying to create a mechanism and a business model whereby they end up being a natural monopoly, right? And that is something to be avoided at all costs. So I like Indigo, they're good, but I don't want it to become the only choice. That's no good at all. We need to have 3-4 airlines that are healthy. It doesn't mean the government's going to bail the other airlines out.
Yes, and I couldn't agree with you more about using train to go from Chennai to Bangalore and back. Also, there's another alternative that I have found it very useful. 7 hours, you can take a car, and if you're usually it'll be a round trip. You go there and you come back, whether it is from Chennai or Bangalore. And I have used cars where there is Wi-Fi connectivity throughout the trip, right?
Okay.
What I do is I sit in the back seat. It's a very comfortable car. I spread out my paraphernalia, and I'm actually working.
You're working, right,
Yes.
right.
Maybe I may not be able to join a hangout like this, but I can do a lot of other things and
Cool.
take my break whenever I want. I also do
Right.
detours. For example, one time I went to Kanchipuram, and it was great. I mean, I love this thing, that flexibility, especially in Chennai, right? I mean, I go from Bangalore to Chennai, do Chennai, and then come back.
Come back, yeah.
And there's so many little things I need to do in Chennai. Now,
Right.
sure, I can use Uber or something else, but having your own car has its own flexibility. You can pick your ways. I mean, I have found it extremely useful. In fact, my next trip, I'm going to try going from Bangalore to Coimbatore and Chennai. All sorts of combinations I'm going to try, because I'm feeling really encouraged by the roads and the flexibility that it gives me.
No, I think you have a point. I have slightly different perspective on highways because I live in Kerala, and the highways here are pretty bad. I mean, not the road surface, but they're so crowded.
There's only one road. There's only one
Actually,
road.
there are two. There is the National Highway 66, and then there is the main central road, which is actually a little bit better than the highway. But it's like it's like a city road, the National Highway, right?
Yes,
and
yes.
it's
Kerala
very
is one big city state.
it's one big city, so it's very tough traveling around Kerala. But I took a trip from Kerala to northern Karnataka to see Badami and the cave temples in Badami and Pattadakal and Aihole and so forth. And I'd rented a car and driven up there. And on the way back, we got on this highway. I think it's called National Highway 48, which is Bombay, Bangalore. It was an excellent road. And we could easily go at like 150 kilometers per hour. It's banked and, it's limited access and so forth. So highways are beginning to catch up. I personally am not a big fan of long distance driving because I get a little queasy, but yeah, if you like long distance driving, I remember how, in the US, you don't think twice about jumping in a car and driving off. I remember I was living in Boston and three of us drove nonstop to Chicago, 19 hours. We took turns and without stopping except for restroom breaks. Yes. I wouldn't say that we're reaching that stage in India, but some of these national highways are pretty damn good, and they're comparable to the best in the world. So yes, I think Bangalore, Madras, Chennai, I've not traveled on that route. That's supposed to be a very good route as well. So yes. There are options. So
there are excellent eateries every 1 hour or so. I mean, you could have snack all the way through. I mean, it's fantastic. I'm telling you, it's great. And another trip I just wanted to mention, because we're talking about highways. I drove from Bangalore to Dharwad, another national highway. Fantastic experience. And the interesting thing is, I had to go from Dharwad to Hyderabad next. And the easiest way to do that was to cross the ghats from Dharwad across to Panjim, take the flight from Panjim to Hyderabad. And that road was also fantastic. People told me that's a ghat road, it might not be good, but no, it was fantastic. 2.5 hours, and we were down in, you have to go up the ghats and then cross and come down. Right. It was fantastic. Right. And I'm assuming that the car is in good condition and everything. Right. I really would pitch for that. It's just to get to know your country better.
Yeah, there is a significant element of that, because I remember I used to drive from Chennai to Trivandrum a few years ago, and for some strange reason I just get lost. In southern Tamil Nadu, I just get lost somewhere, and it was a terrific experience going through some of these by lanes and by roads and stuff like that. There is this romance about Highway 66 in the US, right? People talk about how it's. So I had the same kind of experience. You're going through these little villages, and you see these, huge terracotta horses and village guardian deities, and then you'd come across a stretch of road where you find these people are just sitting on it. On the sides where the macadam, it's just warming their bottoms, and they've spread the rice or whatever on the road to heat, to heat it up. So this is, the highway, or that it is a highway, it's a state highway. It's part of their daily life, right? It's a nice experience, and you go to these small town restaurants, and I have a tip for you. I always get the banana leaf meal, and I only eat the hot stuff. Whatever is so hot that nobody would have put their finger into it, right? So I'm somewhat confident that there is no bacteria from their hands. So no buttermilk, no curds. But those things are incredibly cheap, 25, 30, 50 rupees. Very nutritious and delicious. So yeah, there's a lot to traveling by road. I have a problem in that I get slightly seasick if I'm not driving, right? I think I like that control business. So when I'm in a car, being driven by a driver, I'm a little uneasy. So I don't do too much. But going back to, this country is getting to be a little bit less difficult to travel around in than it was before, and we still don't have the number of hotel rooms and so forth that one would like, relatively inexpensive rooms all over the place, but it's not so bad.
That's another point. Jet could try to solve that problem also, in that they could give people to allow them to book in a hotel of a comparable quality, that you don't have to guess your way through and bite your nails off wondering what kind of an experience you're going to have when you go to a small town.
Right. Although that would be fairly easy to do by signing up with somebody like Oyo.
Yes.
Right? Oyo guarantees a certain level of comfort, and you can be confident that it's not that bad, right? So Yeah, that's a possibility. They could get into more of a backward integration, right? So they're offering a full service offering. So that's a possibility for them. But going back to your original point, I think it's unrealistic for anybody to expect bailouts from the government. We don't have that kind of money, and the taxpayers shouldn't be saddled with all this.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. And we're going to go back to Rajiv with more such illuminating conversations. For one thing, banks, there is the shotgun marriages of so many banks that happened about 6 to 8 months ago. Maybe in
Right,
one of
right.
our future conversations, we can see how those things have panned out, and so on and so forth. Thank you very much, Rajiv.
Thank you, Sri. We'll catch up later.